Hey folks, it's Perry again. I'm in the garage and I have a story to tell you. In this story, you won't see anything actually get fixed, but you will see how I figured out what the problem was. So, let's start our story a year ago. This is a familiar sight from a year ago. And let's start our story here. As you can see, there's a radiator. There's a little bit of oil right there because there was oil in this transmission cooler. The previous radiator had a complete failure of the transmission cooler and water got in the transmission fluid. So I had to replace the transmission. The reason why there's oil here right now is that when I put the new radiator in, which is identical to the old radiator, I replaced all of the lines exactly as they were, but later I removed that radiator or this cooler from the loop and then spliced it directly with the correct 3/8 by half barb fitting. So this truck is equipped with a 26-row transmission cooler, which is the 6-liter upgrade, and so there's plenty of cooling capacity. It does not have the advantage of getting warm in the winter from the engine coolant. But that's where our story starts. The reason why our story starts there is that not very long after replacing the transmission, I started to get a little vibration in the floor, and I felt it with my heel first. That vibration, it came at road speed, so it was like a and if I would turn going down the road, the vibration would kind of come and go, and it felt like there was a repetition where there were two things making that vibration and they were coming in and out of phase. So at one point you would feel just a little bit of a vibration and then it would get worse. And it only happened when the truck was cold, like the first 3 miles I would drive down the road. My first thought after examining everything was the tires. So as you can see, I have brand new tires on here now. The tires that were on the front had, I don't know, 3/32 to maybe an 1/8 inch of tread left on them. They were BFG commercial TAs, and they were installed in 2015. Now this truck has only had maybe 20,000 miles put on it since 2015. I only drive about 5,000 miles a year in it now, so I don't get a lot of miles on it. But the tires were pretty well worn out. Normally you get about 50,000 miles out of a set of those tires, but because they were 5-6 years old and they sat in the sun most of the time, they wore out quicker. So the tread itself was pretty well messed up. The rocks had taken their toll, and it was the tread was starting to become damaged easily by the rocks on our road. So I replaced those tires because the rear tires I replaced in 2012 and they were worn out now, so it was time for a complete new set of tires. Unfortunately, to my surprise, the vibration didn't go away when I put a new set of tires on there because it felt like flat spotted tires. So dry rotted, flat spotted tire, tire warms up, problem goes away after a couple miles. Problem didn't go away. So then I said, well, the transmission came out and the front drive line stub shaft of the drive shaft was hanging in midair from the carrier bearing for about 3 months. And as you can see, the drive shaft is out, and that is the carrier bearing right there. That is a factory Ford carrier bearing, and those are factory Ford U-joints. The carrier bearing is definitely wore out. The rubber is all cracked, and all of the little rubber fingers that provide suspension are gone. So there's a lot of wiggle in that. But that wasn't the problem, and neither were the U-joints. So how did I diagnose that? Well, I took the driveline out completely and I put it in four-wheel drive. So just lock the hubs in, stick it in four-wheel drive, and go drive it down the road. So I now have a front-wheel drive F450 Super Duty, and that's an interesting experience. Mostly because it torque steers really bad. You give it throttle and it steers right. You get off the throttle and it steers left. You could literally drive down the highway with your hands off the steering wheel just using your foot. So that didn't fix it. But I did notice there was a slight little bit of vibration gone. So a little bit of a shimmy in your butt that you feel going down the highway was gone. So the carrier bearing is definitely contributing to some vibration, but not this vibration. So after test driving it and saying, okay, well, there was still that little bit of vibration after taking the drive shaft out, I decided to do what most mechanics would do first. And let me rotate this wheel because it's going to be important. Most mechanics, when you come in and say, I've got a vibration, they're going to do a ball joint check. Now, let me give you some of the service history on this truck. In 2010 or thereabouts, somewhere around there, I replaced the ball joints. So they had like 112,000 miles on them when I replaced them. I also did this was 2012, right before I got the rear tires done. So I did ball joints, I did brake rotors, and those were all tight. In 2016, let's get the exposure better here. In 2016, I replaced both of the unit bearings. The original unit bearings had about 180,000 miles on them. And the races were Brunelled, so when you got up to 60 miles an hour or so, you got a lot of vibration in the front end, and you really didn't want to go faster. So in 2015-16, I did the unit bearings. And I come over to the right-hand side, and I say, well, let's check the ball joints. This one I can shake real well, no problem. Nice and smooth, no complaints. Almost took a header there. Come over to the left one, and yeah, there's your problem, lady. And you can see that knuckle moves, or sorry, the U-joint moves. Because this wheel bearing, having 20,000 miles on it, is completely cashed out. Now, about that vibration. Have a look at that. Right there. Yeah. That's where that tit was coming from. Because I replaced the ball joints with aftermarket ones that have Zerk fittings, the U-joint, what was happening is that even though the hubs were not locked in, because of the way that this failed, with it being at an angular, at an angle that's not straight, it was most likely spinning this stub shaft, and that stub shaft was contacting the Zerk fitting on the U-joint every so often. So there's obviously been some contact with the Zerk fitting there, and that's probably where that little bit of vibration came from. And it probably all resolved itself after about 3 miles, because the bearing would warm up and it would get tighter again. But I never had really any evidence other than the usual, the truck wanders on the road kind of scenario. But there's the problem, and that's what I got to fix today. So I'm not going to show you fixing it because that's boring. Nobody wants to watch that. But I thought I'd share this because it's a valuable diagnostic principle. When you have a vibration, do the very first thing that everybody should do. check your ball joints, and check your wheel bearings, and check your steering joints. And all of that's accomplished by sticking it up on a jack or a jack stand and just wiggling the wheel. If the wheel is flopping around, you got a problem. Thanks for watching. Bye.